Live from Seville, this is The Twilight Show with Harry Waters, and you are listening live.
Good afternoon, good evening, good night. How are you? I hope you're well. I hope you've had an interesting day / week thus far. It is Wednesday. This is The Twilight Show, and I am Harry Waters, and I'll be taking you through the next 90 minutes to talk all about what makes a teacher a teacher. Now, before we get into that, I'm going to go through my inane ramblings as I do every week, all about what's happened, what's been going on. I've seen my guest has arrived. I'm going to invite them as a speaker. They will have received the invite and they'll soon be joining us. So we will be talking about what makes a teacher a teacher. And I'm just going to click them on mute there for a second. But before that, as I say, what have I been up to this week? It's been thus far a busy week. I've found a few new speaking engagements coming up, and February looks like it's going to be absolutely insane. There's lots and lots of things to do. I've got a few projects that I'm writing. I've got my classes, obviously, and then there's the Global Teachers Festival coming up at the end of February. There's the FASE conference, which I've been nominated for an award there, which is kind of exciting. No, it's insanely exciting. Although, it's insanely exciting. And that's up in a city that I've never been to, so I'm excited. My wife has her exhibition at the International Hybrid Art Fair, so there's lots of things going on. And it's just super exciting. Now, one thing that I noticed this morning, somebody mentioned about how much they love their sleep. Now, everybody loves their sleep, I'm pretty sure. I'm a huge fan of my sleep, but I am a morning person. I wonder, are you a morning person? Do you like to get up in the morning? But that said, while I am a morning person, I also absolutely love a siesta in the afternoon. For me, it is the greatest of life's pleasures is to have a nice chill siesta, lay down, relax, turn everything off, and just have that bit of time to yourself. So I wonder, are you a morning person? Are you a stay in bed person, or do you love the odd siesta every now and again? I don't know. Let me know. So that's what's been troubling me today, as to whether I should be a morning person or not, or I should just stay in bed that little bit longer. What else has been going on this week? Oof. I've booked for Alethea's first ever speaking event, which she'll be doing in April. Alethea, obviously, you'll know, is my 9-year-old daughter. So she will be speaking on a stage, probably bigger than any stage I've ever spoken on. So that's pretty awesome for a 9-year-old. Just take a quick sip of water there. And yeah, I'm working on... and another dilemma, because I'm working on one project which is about sustainability, and I've been asked to apply for another project, which is a big project about sustainability, but I have some interesting feelings about the person giving the contract and just exactly how genuine they are in terms of the climate crisis and dealing with said climate crisis. So for me, at the moment, I'm trying to decide whether to apply for that one or not. In the meantime, we're going to hop off for the news. We'll be back very shortly, and you'll hear from us soon.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides, and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Education Secretary Gillian Keegan has addressed school leaders at the Church of England National Education Conference. In a speech that recognised the achievements of Church of England schools and of teachers and leaders in schools across the country, she defined education as something that lets you do things you couldn't beforehand. She also reflected on her own experiences of being educated in a faith school, although it was a different denomination, Catholic. She spoke about the importance of a faith which is still a core part of who I am, and recognised the work of faith schools, particularly Anglican schools, and the role they play in educating young people. She described the Church of England as one of my department's most valued partners, as the largest provider of academy trusts. Ms. Keegan went on to say that her department would protect the schools so that when they became academies, they retain the statutory freedoms and protections that apply to church schools. She also used the speech to comment on standards and said, "I agree with the Prime Minister on Maths to 18, and praised a former teacher of hers, Mr. Ashcroft, who helped her realise my one opportunity." The speech was not without reference to planned industrial action by teachers in the National Education Union, when she commented that, for teachers to have an impact, they need to be in school, and stated that we will be funding schools in real terms at the highest level in history. The speech closed with a statement that her door is always open, but asked that you now work with me to keep as many children in schools as possible during the disruptive strike action. Ms. Keegan ended with a focus on collaboration to make sure our education system flourishes for all children. Half of state schools in England and Wales will close on Wednesday as a result of the planned industrial action, according to reports in many media outlets. The action by NEU coincides with that being taken by civil servants, university staff and train drivers. While schools may close, many will remain open to pupils identified as vulnerable or at risk, as well as some schools offering places to the children of critical workers. The latest data from the Higher Education Statistics Agency shows that the number of EU students choosing to study in the UK has dropped by half since the UK left the EU. Enrolments by EU nationals dropped by 53%, from around 64,000 to 31,000 between 2020 and 2022. Whilst the number of non-EU nationals did increase at the same time period, the data shows that the UK universities still faced significant shortfalls. The exit from the EU and the changing international fee policy saw EU student fees rise from around £9,000 to as high as £38,000. The decline has been particularly sharp in student numbers from Italy, Germany and France. Similar falls have been seen in Scotland, with many mourning the demise of the EU's Erasmus scheme, as well as the loss of diversity brought to courses by students from the EU. Universities UK said the changes in numbers had dented the finances of some universities and impoverished campus life. The HuffPost featured an article focusing on new data which shows that 87% of teenagers want better and more inclusive sex education. The survey by student discount app Student Beans found that 39% did not feel represented in the sex education they received. 27% of girls surveyed admitted they did not feel comfortable setting and communicating boundaries with a partner, compared to 23% of male respondents. 89% of all respondents said they did not see LGBTQIA+ themes in the teaching. With Generation Z having the highest percentage of non-straight people, almost double that of millennials, perhaps it's time for another review. Finally, Schools Week focuses on Ofsted's announcement on how it will conduct thematic reviews of alternative provision. Visits will take place in the spring and summer terms, with a national report out in the autumn. The visits will not result in judgments, and the report will not identify local areas specifically, although they will be listed separately. There will be a focus on how AP supports children to stay in mainstream, and full details are available on the Schools Week website. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, this week I'm going to talk about GDPR, an acronym that has bounded around and caused quite a stir when it was first introduced back in 2018. GDPR stands for General Data Protection Regulation, and it's governed by the ICO, which is the Information Controller's Office, an independent body set up by the government to uphold information rights. Thanks, Steve. That's crystal clear now, I hear you say. What does it mean to the general classroom teacher? Well, your school will have a policy, which you will have signed somewhere to say you've read it. If you haven't, it might be worth taking a look. In it, there'll be an outline of measures to protect data and usually a process of investigation in the event of a data breach. A data breach in a school is when personal data is compromised and a person can be identified, for example, first name and last name. In a school, breaches can be as serious as the introduction of ransomware, where data is locked by a cyber attack, or as simple as the wrong letter being sent to the wrong carers. Now the question is, how do we protect ourselves? First, if you're still wandering around with a USB pen hanging off your lanyard, make sure it's encrypted. There is lots of free encryption software around. If you can, migrate your data into the school's cloud. This puts the onus back on the school to keep the data safe. It's also backed up regularly. I know what you'll say next. If I'm in the cloud and the internet goes down, I can't get my plan in. Yes, you're correct, but your school laptop will be encrypted, so you can save current files locally to enable working offline. If you have a machine with a small memory like a Chromebook, sync what you need and leave the rest in the cloud. With the top ads on a search for school data breach all reading claim around £10,000 today, obviously no win, no fee, do you want to cost your school that much money? I'll leave you with this. If you take a digital register and display it while you take it, could it be classed as a data breach? As always, I'd love to hear what you want to know about tech. Let us know at TT Radio Official. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Thank you very much, Steve. Quite a lot to think about and unpack over that news, and also the tech briefing there. But we're not going to get into that right now. I am going to very briefly introduce my guest. Helen Slee has come along today to talk about what makes a teacher a teacher. So I'm going to ask Helen if they can unmute their Podbean app. They'll be able to find it right there on the phone. This is always the best bit, because if I try to unmute you, you probably won't be heard. However, if you can't find it, I can try and unmute you. It's a tricky one to find, hidden there. They'll find it soon, don't worry. So we are going to talk about what makes a teacher a teacher. I'm going to try and unmute, see if that works. Can I hear you?
Can you hear me?
Helen? Oh, yes, I can hear you.
Fantastic,
Woo-hoo!
Thank you.
You didn't need to find it in the end. It's all good. It was all good. So, a very brief introduction there. That you're here to talk as a teacher. What's a teacher? You're also an activist, and you'll be speaking very soon as well. But I'd like to know first, what is your journey in ELT?
All right. Well, I think like a lot of English language teachers, I fell into this career by accident because I originally started training in university back when dinosaurs roamed the earth in 2009 in dramatic arts and education. So I was originally studying theater and teaching drama to young people. And I was part of the cooperative education program, which is like doing internships in the summer for extra university credit. And the second placement I ever did was at a drama English language camp. Can you hear me? Can you hear me clearly?
Hello, Helen. You're breaking up quite a lot.
Can you hear me now?
Fact, I can't hear you at all at the moment. So
that's strange.
I've cut the connection to our chat. Let's see if you're still in there. If you can hear me at all, I'm going to try muting and unmuting you. Hello, can you hear? Hello?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Yes, I can hear you again. You're back.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. Super.
There we
I don't know
go.
what happened there.
Oh, don't
Yeah.
worry. This is the beauty of live radio. Is this? It's not the first time it's happened. I'm going to be completely honest with you. This is
Probably
about my
won't be the
70th
last.
show. Yeah, and I'd say that kind of thing, something along those lines, has happened on at least 10 occasions. So
Okay,
you
good.
know,
Not just
don't
me
worry.
then.
It might even happen again in the next hour or so. So
Well,
just bear
we'll see
in
what
mind.
happens. Yeah.
Exactly.
Technology,
So,
right? Can't live with it, can't live
oh,
without it.
exactly. So you were teaching drama to young people, and then the summer, and then that's when we lost you.
Yeah, that's okay. So one summer I went to a summer job teaching English and drama to Italian kids in summer camps. And just opened my eyes to the idea of teaching the English language to, speakers of other languages or bilingual speakers, something that I just never considered before. And then I went back and worked there for 3 consecutive summers and became a camp supervisor my final summer. And then after that, always kept it in mind. Went on to do a little bit of drama work, but in the end, I spent some time working in a supermarket, as we all did, good old Tesco. But then I I got my TEFL certificate, went to Italy, taught in a school for 6 months, didn't have a very good experience, and was advised to get my CELTA because I was sort of told that you'll really improve your teaching skills, it'll open more doors in terms of your qualifications. So I went to Scotland and took my certificate for English language teaching from Cambridge. Then went to Spain and taught there for 3 years at a small academy, and then applied for a job at the British Council in a different area of Spain. Went there, stayed there for 2 years, and then COVID happened.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Well, yeah. It's hard to describe that
That
time.
was a thing.
Yeah. And, after all of those years of traveling and studying, I spent some time with host families, did all sorts of stuff in the past, but then COVID hit and everything shut down for health reasons, obviously. And
yeah.
And then I came back to the UK and I started teaching online, teaching Chinese kids online, which went well for a while, but it was a really big pay cut and a real loss of benefits. So I applied for a job at a local college here in West Yorkshire where I live, got in, and I taught there for a year. And then after that, the company decided not to renew my contract at the last minute and at the end of last term. And so I struggled for a while job hunting, trying to find something. In the past, it was different. I could pick up and go anywhere, right? But now that my partner and I live together, we have a house, we have commitments, we have a mortgage to pay. It's not that easy for me to just go where the work is anymore. So now I am working at First Direct, the bank. And right now I'm a customer service representative, but in the future, I'm looking forward to getting into training and coaching because it's a lot more close to teaching and a lot of working with people, things that I really love, and transitioning back into a more coaching, training, educational role in the future. It's been quite a journey.
So, yeah, with a few bumps along the way, I think a lot of us experienced various bumps, especially around that COVID moment. That was certainly that was definitely something that I don't think I'll forget in a hurry. But yeah, you went back to the UK and you were working there, and then, as you say, your contract was not renewed, and you were told the last 2 weeks, basically, unlucky, no contract for you. Sorry, it's just the way it is. And then Of course, there aren't as many opportunities at the moment with English language teaching in Britain because they've basically tried to ban anyone who isn't British coming in.
Yeah.
Brexit as well. There's another thing that
Hmm.
happened recently that has been fantastic for English language
Yeah.
teaching,
Big impact.
particularly in
Yeah.
the UK. So yeah,
And it was time of
it's
year as
difficult.
well,
Yeah,
because in September, my contract was up, and I was told, and oh well, everybody's finished hiring. They've done their hiring in July and August. I did apply for about 7 or 8 jobs after, but some teaching online, some were more like coaching or other like similar but not the same types of roles. But yeah, could not find anything, which was frustrating and difficult at the time. Yeah.
and it's not like you're not qualified because you've
Mm.
recently got another qualification. Did you not?
Yes, I'm working through my TESOL diploma from Trinity College. So the course is in 4 parts, and I've completed the first 3. So I'm on the final part now. I've completed the teaching practice module. I've completed the phonology interview, and recently just received my results and heard that I passed the written exam. So the remaining part of the course is 4 projects. So when I finish those projects, I'll have my teaching diploma in addition to my teaching certificate and all my years of experience in various different areas, camps, schools, host families. So
Online.
working, I spent online. I spent some time at my university, which I didn't mention, I suppose, doing academic support. Quite a lot of the students who came in for academic support were international students or visiting students who were there for 1 term or 1 semester. So yeah, I mean, it's been years and years and years. And so it was a bit of a shock when the school where I was working, I'd been sort of assured all year, oh yeah, we'll renew your contract at the end of the year. Oh yeah, we'll renew your contract at the end of the year. And then exactly 2 weeks before, which is the requirement by UK law, they have to notify you within 2 weeks. Yeah, we won't be renewing your contract. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
I wish you told me that in advance.
Yeah, if
it
you
was
told
a
me
bit
that 2
blindsiding.
months ago, it would have been fine,
I would have had lots of time to look for another job, seek out other opportunities. Yeah, and so it was a real shock and a bit of a difficult scenario. I won't say it was the same as COVID, because I was once COVID started, I was expecting my contract to not be renewed with the British Council. And in fact, the British Council had made like a global announcement to all workers on temporary contracts that their contracts wouldn't be renewed, not just teachers, but administration staff, like social workers, the lot. And that was, as in response to COVID, and that was not personal. My manager cried as she told me that she was really sorry, but she couldn't renew my contract, so like that was circumstance. I understand that,
Yeah.
And we had some time to prepare. COVID had been going on. It started in March. My contract ended in June. We had some time to, talk about it, prepare ourselves, think about
Get your heads
what we would
around it.
do. Yeah. We always say nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. Nobody expects a pandemic, right? We had to figure it out as we went along. But, there was it was a big shakeup, I think, in the English language teaching community globally. A lot of teachers suddenly found that their jobs were completely changing because they had to go hybrid or online or
overnight as well.
Yeah.
Like, it's insane.
Yeah. And
Exactly.
so that was a really hard adjustment.
Yeah, it's never ideal. However, you do have opportunities coming up, certainly to put yourself in a shop window, the biggest shop window in English language teaching, quite possibly, in April.
Yeah, I last year I was able to attend the ITEFL conference for the first time. I'd never been able to afford to go or find the means, but last year I
obviously you came to see me talk, didn't you? Of course, obviously, 100%.
One day I missed you, but then you were doing a pop-up talk, and I did get to
there you
catch
go.
part of it, which was great. Yeah.
Oh,
You
wow.
did too.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
I did, yeah. I did. Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know. I was trying to just wind you up and joke around there. But you got me. You got me
I got
good.
you.
Well done. You
Yeah.
did.
I was very lucky in that I got a scholarship from TDSIG, the Teacher Development Special Interest Group. Scholarships are all closed for this year. They've all been applied for and sorted, but I would highly recommend to teachers who are looking at ITEFL and going, I'd really like to attend that conference. I'd really like to, meet other people and go to sessions and learn new things. That's what that's what they're for. That's what the scholarships are for. Scholarships, bursaries, grants. The conference was held in Ireland last year in Belfast, and I live in England, so I had to fly. And the bursary covered my entrance, my stay in my accommodation in a hotel, all of my food for the week, and my attendance at the pre-conference event. I think, and my flights, I think in the end, my partner attended too. He took the time off work and came. He didn't attend the conference. He just got a week of holiday in Belfast. But
a whole week in Belfast.
I know. Yeah. Great. And in the end, I think we spent something like £15 of our own money. The rest of it was completely covered by the scholarship. So to people, as I say, to young teachers or to teachers who are looking to get more into the English language teaching community and meet like-minded individuals, check the scholarships, apply for them. That's what they're there for. And sometimes they go unclaimed. Last year, several scholarships went unclaimed. So yeah, definitely. And I went, and it was an amazing experience. And I attended a morning workshop on applying to speak at the next conference. And I thought, well, I've attended, I've seen lots of things, I've been trying to put myself out there. And I thought, why not? I'll apply to speak. If I don't get accepted, well, at least I applied, right? So I applied and I was accepted. So I'll be speaking at the next conference in April. I'm very excited. It'll be interesting. And I'm looking forward, and this year it'll be hosted in Harrogate, which is much nearer to where I live.
It's down the road, isn't it?
Yeah, just down the road, just a wee drive. So no flights this year. Yay. So that's fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to it. I think that the conference sort of builds up a little community. People, you get to know people, you go back and see them every year. You remember their past talks, you look forward to new talks, and you get to see also how other teachers develop, like what they talked about last year, what they're talking about this year.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. And yeah, I think it's an important part of professional development. If you can attend, obviously there are things like money and travel and other barriers, but yeah. So
well, that was it for me. Last year was also my first year because I've never been able to afford it. Obviously, it being in the UK, me being in Spain, having a family coming mid school year and stuff. So I have to, leave my wife with my daughter, which it's not a huge thing, but on top of all of that. So it was the first time I went last year as well. But again, I could only go because somebody was paying for me to be able to go there.
Yeah.
Which is what I love about a lot of, other conferences as well, which have the kind of, a good vibe. It's not the same as IATEFL, obviously, but like the TESOL Spain, there's a brilliant one here in Spain. There's one FESE as well, which is coming up in Athea. And just so many
TESOL has a conference
opportunities
too every year.
Yeah. There's just so many opportunities to meet people, and they can be in your own countries. Usually the entry fee is a lot cheaper as well. So, maybe 30 or 40 euros to go to a conference, and then you've just got your transport to get there. There's not as many as at IATEFL, obviously. But there are opportunities in all sorts of places. So, but yeah, if you ever get the chance to go to IATEFL, it's absolutely worth it. And if you're going this year, you should go and watch Helen's talk, which is about...
Well, this year I'm going to be talking about teaching pronunciation and diversity and inclusion, and how teachers can teach pronunciation, which is really important for our learners, to make sure that they're understandable to others, that other people can comprehend them, but also to ensure that we are teaching them that their accent is valid and good, that we're not teaching them to speak like a British person or speak like an American. We're teaching them to be comprehensible, and we're teaching them with the intention to help them understand others and be understood. And how can teachers, especially native speaker teachers, teach pronunciation and avoid native speakerism and avoid accentism? How can you present yourself as a model or present multiple models and avoid displaying a particular model as the best or and avoid devaluing your learners' accents? So I'm going to talk a lot about that. I learned a lot during my diploma while I was preparing for my phonology interview about teaching pronunciation and how we teach pronunciation and how we can teach pronunciation English as a lingua franca rather than teaching in a specific way. Especially as non-native teachers out there are excellent teachers. They're fantastic. And their learners have them as models. So, what's the difference between them and me? None. They're a qualified English teaching professional. So there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to teach excellent pronunciation to their learners.
Well, exactly that, because accent and pronunciation are two very different things. And it's a discussion I have quite frequently, obviously, in English language profession, of the fact that I do have that traditional, particularly here in Spain, the sought after, I'm saying obviously in inverted commas, the native accent of the British, clear British accent. And it is one of the huge issues. Now, I'm not defending anybody at all, but it's the parent of particularly young children who say, oh, but I want them to get their accent. And it's just like, no, you don't. No, you don't. You don't want that. Nobody wants that. And it's not going to happen with 2 hours a week of English. You're not going to get any. If you send your child at the age of 3 to the UK and they live in the UK and they go to school in the UK, perhaps they'll get a British accent, but it's not going to come from 2 hours with a bald, bearded fella who jumps around like an absolute moron most of the class. No names mentioned, obviously.
Are you describing someone in particular there, Harry?
Yeah, I've got no idea. I don't know. Just for example, today we in our class that we have, we did the egg drop experiment. Well, we did that in the last class, and then we worked through how to, we went out and we got things from nature to put around the egg, and we used only recycled materials from the house and put it all together and stuff like that. And then we threw it off the balcony, and I'm up there on the balcony dancing and cheering, of course. But the students weren't quite as much as I was. So yeah, that's me. That's me. Yeah. I'm that teacher that does the dancing and the cheering.
Well, I mean, both of my parents are British, and they moved to Canada before I was born, raised me there. If you listen to us speaking to each other, you wouldn't think they were my parents because their accent's completely different. But, that doesn't make all Englishes are English, whether it's being spoken by a South African or, a Kenyan or a Spanish or a Spaniard, or a Canadian or an Australian or somebody who's from Brazil. It doesn't matter. English is English, It might be more difficult for us to understand accents we're unfamiliar with, but if we take the time and tune our ear to it, we can understand anything.
Exactly. And I've given this example again in the past, and often it takes, your students that moment, the little while to adapt to each other's Englishes. So particularly if you're in the UK and you're teaching, I don't know, a Moroccan student and a Japanese student, they might take time to, adjust to each other's English, but that's what it's all about. So
absolutely, yeah.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah,
you're doing that.
What's going on? And somebody said to me a little while ago, when I announced that all of this had gone on with my job and things had changed, and I announced that I had just done the exam and I was really excited about that. And then a week later, I announced that I was starting this job at First Direct, which is a very well-known bank in the UK.
Yeah.
And lots of congratulations from people on LinkedIn, lots of really nice comments, but also a lot of people going, does this mean you're leaving teaching? Which is a fair question, And so I sent quite a few messages that week saying, Well, actually, a lot of what I do for First Direct draws on most of the same skills that I used in the English language teaching classroom. You know, classroom management, managing personalities, I do that on the phone. Like,
Do you know, my
guiding
my
people to.
automatic my automatic reaction when I saw that was not, "Are you leaving teaching?" but, "Oh, they're not being paid enough for their job, so they have to get another one on top of it." Cost of living crisis. My automatic
Yeah,
reaction was that, and I was like, "I don't want to push just in case
yeah,
they come back and say, 'Harry, I need 2 jobs because,
yeah,
heating,
yeah.
that's kind of
Mortgage to
important.'"
pay.
So
Yeah,
that was the immediate thing that popped up in my head, was that you
yeah,
just had to do another job because
yeah.
it doesn't pay enough. And in the LinkedIn description that I did of this was, what is it that makes a teacher? Is it the classes? Is it the experience? Is it the fact that we like being underpaid and underappreciated? Obviously up there on the list. So you've talked about your experience as a teacher, which
Mm,
is very wide, very varied, and for some quite huge companies, to be honest.
mm,
You've talked about your development, your qualifications, as it were, and how you're
mm.
continuing to go with your qualifications.
Yeah.
You're training other teachers. You're doing this session where you're going to one of the biggest EOT conferences in the world.
Mm.
Um, so the big question is, are you a teacher?
Yes, I say I'm a teacher. Some people
Okay.
would say, well, you're not working in a classroom right now. Okay, so lots of teachers don't teach in a classroom. Lots of teachers teach at their desk on a computer in their house. Does that make them less of a teacher than a teacher who teaches in a classroom? Some teachers teach on a mobile app. Does that make them not a teacher because they don't have a classroom? Is a hybrid
It,
teacher less of a teacher than a teacher who only teaches face to face?
but also, it's like, let's think of a retired teacher.
Mm,
To me, a retired teacher, they're still a teacher.
yeah.
Like I still refer to my teachers from school as sir. Like if
Mm,
they're like if they were a male teacher at school, even if I message them now, and it's um that's the big question for me is, you know, once you've become a teacher, like
mm,
when does it actually kind of stop? So I worked for a year as an ELT consultant, but while I
mhm,
was doing that, I picked up a couple of private classes just because I I really love teaching. I really
mm,
enjoy doing that, and now I do materials writing and a lot of teacher training. But because of that, I want to make sure that I still love that connection with students. Now,
mhm.
if they weren't here in my class every week, I would still consider myself to be a teacher
Yeah.
even
Yeah,
if
I
I'm not
mean,
physically with the students at that moment in time.
mhm, yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think people forget that teaching is essentially relationship building. Like we
Mhm.
build relationships with our students and we guide them. They set goals, things they want to achieve in their language journey. Be it, I want to be able to go to England and understand, or be it I want to watch films on Netflix without subtitles in the future, or I want to talk to people all over the world online and type to them and not worry about not understanding what they say. Whatever goals they have, we build relationships with them, and we help guide them towards achieving those goals through like activities and exercises throughout class. Like that's kind of what we do. So I think that's why teachers will stay in the teaching profession for years and years and years, even when they're overworked or underpaid or not given professional development opportunities, or not supported, or when their contracts get messed around, or when pandemics happen. A lot of teachers will take pay cuts or go partial freelance or go partial private, or take multiple teaching positions, because building relationships is what makes this job for them. Like building relationships with students, like supporting them, facilitating their learning opportunities, watching them grow and change and achieve their goals, and then move on to more advanced goals and get to other
Mhm.
places. You know I talked a bit about how in the development of my career, I started in drama, moved into camps. I spent time with host families. I've done a lot of different jobs, worked in a grocery store, now I work at a bank, and all of those different parts of your journey, you don't expect them, and they just come up and you go, oh, and you realize, oh, I actually learned a lot from that. I learned X, Y, and Z from that. So even though I wasn't expecting that, it wasn't unpredictable. It was a little bit of a, what's the word?
Detour.
Yeah, detour. You end up learning a lot from it. When I started university back in 2007, 2007, I was fully in the theater program. I did not expect myself to get interested in education. I did not expect myself to get interested in language education. The person who I am now, the Helen from the past would just look at me and be like, who are you? What happened? So I think it's the same with learners' journey. Sometimes learners start at a school and they have certain expectations about what they're going to learn and how it's going to go. And sometimes we as teachers have to set expectations for them, introduce them to different kinds of expectations they could have. Going back to pronunciation. Well, I'm not going to try and make you sound like me, because there are a million ways you could sound as an English speaker.
And as long as we can understand you,
yeah,
then
that's
fine.
the important thing, or they come in expecting, well, I want to be able to speak 1,000 words by the end of this year. Well, okay, it's good that you want to know lists of vocabulary, but can you have a conversation? Let's role play this. Let's watch this video. Let's try this. Oh, you said that really good thing in that speaking activity. Let's look at that emergent language. What are other ways we can say this? You know what I mean? And so quite often, we take our learners off the beaten path. We take them ways they weren't expecting. And that's a good thing. And unfortunately, I think going back to English language teachers, we often end up off the beaten path. When you started teaching English, Harry, did you expect yourself to be hosting podcasts and designing materials?
Well, podcast didn't exist when I started teaching. I couldn't quite see into the future. Back in 2007, incidentally, is when I qualified to become a teacher. So that's when I left the UK. But no, I couldn't picture staying as a teacher basically until about my 5th year of teaching. The whole time it was a means to me being able to travel, and then suddenly I really enjoyed it. I loved it, but I didn't get deep into anything. I just turned up to my classes, did my classes, and went off and did my own thing. But then when I came to Spain and I had to stay here, it was I really like that, and I'm quite good at it. But I also like training people, so I kind of went down that route. So it was a long meander for me. But there were detours along the way, that's for sure. Mostly the first 5 years were just one big detour before I actually realised this is what I want to do. I have a question for you, though, a hypothetical question.
Okay.
Most questions are, to be honest. If you were offered a job, let's say at IATEF, somebody comes to your talk and they're, the owner of a language academy in West Yorkshire, and they said to you, I'm the owner of a language academy in West Yorkshire, and I would like to offer you a job as a teacher and teacher trainer. What would be your reaction now that, you're in another job? You're in a job that's perhaps more stable than a teaching job, that perhaps has a better wage than a teaching job. What would be your reaction if someone came along to you now and offered you that job?
Well, first, I'd be flattered. And then secondly, I'd ask for more information about the conditions, because that's what it comes down to. We've skirted around talking about teachers, struggling, taking different. It comes down to working conditions. It's not only about pay. What are the hours? Am I paid for prep time? What about professional development?
I'm not prepping anything.
No prep lessons. You can find lots of no prep lessons online. Actually, there's some great blogs. You
can. It's not a great way to live day by day, though.
No.
Every now and again, it's really good. I love it every now and again. But as a kind of general rule, it's not fantastic.
Well, we're not following along. We're not giving our learners what they need, right? We're
Exactly.
giving ourselves what's convenient for us. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Don't want to plan. Okay, I'm not going to.
Yeah. Yeah. Professional development. Is there professional development at school? If not, is support offered to teachers who want to like work on their own self-driven professional development? Is there support if a teacher wants to do things like go to a conference or things like that, or take an online course or do a diploma, for example? Because I saved up and paid for my diploma, but that takes time. Some people can't do that.
And you've got a mortgage as well. Wow. I don't understand that. I don't know how that's humanly possible. Especially with gas. You have to pay for gas and heat. Oh, that was before that was before all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Chose a good time to do it.
So, yeah. Well, as Mark Knopfler says, got to feed the kids and put the diesel in the tank, right? We all have to pay. But like, is the school a member of any associations? Because if a school's a member association, then there's certain regulations they're supposed to follow. And, are the teachers at the school unionized? That's a huge thing. And there are, Unite here in the UK has been accepting English language teachers since 2017. The TEFL Workers Union, TAWSIG, the Teachers as Workers Special Interest Group, is always like reaching out to teachers and trying to support them when they have difficulties at work. What's like the school facilities like? What are their how are the teachers? What's the atmosphere? Is it professional? Is everybody really friendly? Do you do like outings, or is it like a really toxic place where we're all fighting over books and who's the best teacher? And are there observations? Like all these sorts of questions.
Who is the best teacher?
Every teacher is the best teacher for at least one of their students. That's the thing. Like, it doesn't matter if you can't be the best for everyone, but I guarantee there's at least one student that you've had a big impact on, and you're their best teacher. Yeah. And that's a good feeling.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I would ask about the conditions, and if the conditions were, because as other teachers have said before, I might be willing to take a pay cut if it was for a good position at a school where, I would be treated with respect and dignity, and I wouldn't have to supply my own course materials, or if I did, I would be, there'd be support in that. Is there professional development opportunities? Would I have a mentor or be a mentor? Like what's the setup? And I think quite a lot of school owners would go, to some of those questions. Yeah. Some of them wouldn't, though. Some of them would say, well, I have this and I have this and I have this, and we have this professional development program. And if a teacher's been with us for a year, then they can apply for us to pay for half of qualification, all of this sort of stuff. And that was my experience when I worked at the British Council in Spain. While I was there, the British Council paid for me to do the TILEC, the Teaching Young Learners Extension Certificate. Mm-hmm. And had I stayed there longer, if COVID hadn't happened, I would have gone on to do a Delta or a DIP, and they would have funded it. Yeah. Because, the British Council saw it as professional development for their employees, only makes a better working environment. Everybody's more qualified, everybody's more trained, everybody's more positioned to help each other. The learners are getting a better service. Teachers are more confident and educated. It only benefits the business. They don't mind paying out in the short term for the long-term positive impact. So yeah. As I say, I was surprised when I went into the job that I've just started at First Direct. I was kind of not surprised, but the training is intense. I'm actually still in my training period at First Direct, even though I started on the 12th of December. Yeah, they have 6 weeks of training. 3 weeks of like sort of online module training where you learn a lot of what would be the word? You learn all of the ins and outs of like banking.
Okay.
Terminology and procedures, how procedures are done, and then there's like software and, all things like that. And then you have a mentor for a week or more where someone is right next to you as you're like working through tasks, taking calls, speaking to customers, all of that. And so you have an experienced coach. That's the job I'd like to do in the future. Who's helping you. And then after that, you spend 4 weeks in what they call pod, which is you are taking calls live. You don't have your mentor there anymore, but there's a help desk that you can question at any time, and they respond within a minute or two. So the first sort of 6 weeks, all of the support you could want, like personally, professionally, getting paid on time. I was never paid on time at my last job. It was always 1, 2, 3, or 4 days late. Getting paid on time, getting paid the correct amount, paying tax. Shouldn't be a big ask.
No, it really shouldn't. The problem is it really can be a huge ask, this whole, getting paid on time, because a lot of the time, particularly, in Spain or in other places as well, academies are kind of built by an ex-teacher who's like, oh, well, I've got an opportunity here and I can build the academy. Perhaps they're not the greatest business people in the world. Perhaps they're not the greatest managers in the world. And, it gets to a point where, particularly if they've been around since any point near the early 2000s when there was a huge boom, they have a lot of loyal students there. So, they can end up just being massively overwhelmed. And then, things like, payments come late, or, the wrong amount of money goes in, or, all sorts of different things can happen.
I was underpaid twice in my last job.
Yeah, that's never ideal. Now, what do you think it would mean to teachers if they had that kind of first, the first couple of weeks, the first 3-4 weeks support with, the intensive training and then the mentor? Now, that sounds kind of ideal for some things, but I think when I was a trainee teacher, if I'd had somebody breathing down my neck, observing all of my first classes, I might have got too nervous in that situation. But I think, but also on the flip side of that, if we all had that, not just during our, certificates, if we had that in our first few weeks as teachers, we wouldn't look upon our observations or peer observations as being a terrifying thing. It would just be another one of those things that we did before and we're doing again. So why not carry on with it? So it seems like a sensible idea.
Yeah. Well, okay. This seems like I'm going off on a tangent. I promise I'll bring it back. One of my best friends several years ago bought a kitten, and
I love kitten tangents.
Yeah, I know. Kittens are the best, right? Why wouldn't I talk about kittens? So when he bought the kitten, he bought also her carrier, as in the thing that you put the cat in when you take him to the vet, and he left it out and put some toys in it and encouraged her to play in, on, around it all the time. And so as she grew up, she's an adult cat now. It's been years. The carrier still sits in the living room, and it's played with and used, and he uses it. He'll put her in it and carry her around just for fun sometimes, or take her out for, Carrier does not equal vet terrible times. It's just part of her life, in the same way, relating that back to what we were just said, it would just normalize observations. If people popped in and out of our classes all the time, if our first week as a teacher, we had an observer who was in most of our classes, or several observers, we just get used to having another pair of eyes and getting some constructive criticism, so that when observation time comes around, it's not a mad panic to have the best lesson I could ever have ever. Just, someone's watching. Well, they've done that a million times before, so I'm just going to go in and do my best like I always do, and it'll be fine. Right. Yeah. So in the same, as my friend Jack usualized the carrier for his cat, we should usualize observations for teachers so that it's not such a stressful experience.
100%. Now we are going to shoot off for a couple of seconds, but when we come back, we're going to talk about, we've talked about your teacher, we've talked about your trainer. We're going to talk about your activist side when we return in about 30 seconds. So don't go anywhere.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
We are back. I'm just checking that I can hear Helen.
Can you hear me clearly?
I can hear you. Fantastic. That's great. I've discovered that Podbean has fixed the bug of not being able to unmute guests. That was a fairly distressing bug as a host, not being able to unmute guests. And the unmute button isn't very easy to find when you're in the app as a guest. So Don't worry,
Yeah,
you're
I
not the
never
first
found
person
it.
to struggle to find it. Well, there you go. We'll have to save that for the next show, obviously.
Hmm.
So before we popped off to listen to John Catt there, we mentioned you are an activist.
Mhm.
Now, I am not a huge fan of the word activist, not because I don't think activists are awesome. I think activists are amazing. I think they've been given a negative kind of connotation. The word has been given
Mm.
negative connotations. It shouldn't have. Absolutely, it shouldn't have. I think people should be proud to be activists about whatever they're fighting for, as long as they're not harming others, in my opinion.
Mm.
So the new word change maker has come around as well,
Mm.
which I think is slightly different to an activist. But for what do you activize?
What do I act on?
There you go. What do you act
Activists
on?
act, yeah. Well, in
They
my
do.
past, I was an actor. Anyway, in all honesty, what I act on is existing. As a non-binary person, so someone whose gender is not male nor female, but somewhere in the middle, or neither of those things, just existing and using MX mix as a title instead of Miss, Ms, or Mr, or asking people to use they them pronouns when they talk about me. Just some people would call like me existing and asking people to make those changes for me. Some people would call that activism. I wouldn't, because I think, as I say, that's just my existence, just who I am.
Mhm.
And when people make a mistake, if they accidentally use she, her, I don't really mind. Just calmly correct them. Usually they self-correct and go, I'm really sorry, Helen. No, it's fine. Don't worry. It's hard to adjust. I don't mind. One of my very close non-binary friend, Mandy's, I occasionally use the wrong pronouns for them. So, I know how it is. So some people say me existing in the way that I am is activism. By being the way I am, I'm pushing my agenda or throwing it in someone's face. And
Oh.
don't see it that way. I just am. Sorry, I think you are blowing me a little out of proportion.
So let's look specifically at the, not specifically at your existence, which is awesome, by the way. Thank you for doing that. Existing, by the way.
Thanks.
It's a pretty awesome thing to do.
Yeah.
So let's look at our world that we often talk of, the ELT world and the ELT sphere, and let's think a little bit about representation. Now, there are things slowly coming out about representation for the LGBTQI plus community. There are certain people making noise about it and being listened to. I'm sure we'll talk about those people soon. And the steps that have been taken, I'm going to say probably in the last 5 or 6 years, are the babyest of steps like you can possibly imagine. Let's go back to the news that we listened to earlier. The penultimate section on the news was about sex education and the fact that most people there was zero talk of LGBTQ anywhere within the sex education, which for me it would seem like kind of a logical place to start. To educate people, like the whole sex education side of it. But then I thought back to my sex education at school.
You don't want to do that, Harry.
Well, no, it was the worst thing in the world ever, because Mr. Goddard did it, who was like a 60-year-old horrible teacher, the most uncomfortable person in the world. And he couldn't bring himself to say the word penis in class.
No.
And it's like, we're doing sex education, man. And I remember Joseph Dean going over to him and just saying, sir, what's an erection? Just like, and the awkwardness of that moment. So the fact that it doesn't seem like it's evolved all that much since then is quite upsetting. But how do you feel about LGBTQ, where it is in... Oh, my dog is saying hello to everybody there. You can stop barking.
Hi, dog.
Thank you very much. Her name's Estrella. Where is LGBTQ at the moment, and where does it need to go? I'm just going to get rid of her.
Yeah, that's okay. Don't worry. So, I mean, this is a controversial discussion because ELT is so global that English language teaching and English language teachers are operating in countries where it's still illegal to be a lesbian, to be gay, to be trans, or to be non-binary like me. And so there are a lot of teachers who cannot do anything, even if they are gay themselves, or non-binary themselves, or trans themselves. They can't do or say anything in their classroom for fear of reprisal or retribution. And then there are a lot of teachers who are operating in countries which where it isn't illegal to be LGBTQ plus. From this point onward, I'm just going to say queer because I think that's a little easier. I know for
Okay.
some people that word is a bit hard because there's a history of it being used against the LGBTQ community. You're queer, it was used as an insult in the same way that gay was used as an insult. But in the colorful history of this community, as usual, we have taken this label and worn it as a badge of honor. So quite a lot of people of my own age, I'm 32, use it just as a term, whereas for people of older generations, they still remember it as a slur. But I'm going to be using it just as a description of people who are LGBTQ. So a lot of queer teachers, or teachers who are teaching in countries where it's not illegal or unsafe to be queer, are still sort of finding that there is no representation in materials. And this doesn't just stop at queer representation, but
Of course.
as a quick example, when you study the family, I guarantee you that the textbook you're using probably has white mom, white dad, white baby, white son, white daughter. It's the
That's
Simpsons,
one,
right?
yeah,
Two
it's
and a
one,
half kids.
it's one thing that's slowly kind of
Yeah.
in recent textbooks, ones that I've seen,
Yeah.
new editions that are
Yes.
coming out
It's
last
true.
year, this year, very slowly
Yeah.
there's slightly more representation, and I've even seen
Mm.
in a textbook there was a part about two uncles.
Aw.
But
Yeah.
it's very, very, very rare.
Mhm.
It's almost unheard of.
Yeah. Well, because I suppose if you look at it from the publisher's point of view, because ELT is global, they want to publish their book and sell it in as many countries as they can. And as I've said, teaching English operates in countries where that's illegal, and they won't be able to sell that book in that country. So they think, well, profit margins, I'm just going to take this out because I'll lose this area of my potential consumers. And so but I mean, I would say, well, then just have multiple books. I don't see why that's a problem.
That's exactly it, especially with digital books nowadays as
Yeah.
well. It's something that's easily, well, not easily rectified, but you can change it.
Yeah. When seeing multiple moms or multiple dads, or seeing single moms and single dads, even single parents, we don't see that. Interracial couples or grandparents raising kids, like all of these situations really happen. Parents who have kids but are also caring for one or both of their elderly parents at home, all these sorts of different family types really should be represented. But another thing is that learners need to see themselves represented in the materials, and at the last job I was at, the one where I was let go at the last minute, I was teaching majority learners from Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and UAE, so mostly Muslim students. There was a whole unit in the book about New Year. Well, they don't celebrate New Year. So
Useful.
Yeah, not useful. So I normally would talk, I expanded the lesson, changed it to talk about different holidays that they celebrate. We talked about Ramadan, and we talked about Eid, and we talked about, for example, Saudi National Day. Most countries have a sort of like Canada Day, Saudi National Day, Independence Day. They have a day which celebrates unification, or
Britain doesn't have that.
No.
They've got Guy Fawkes Night, haven't they? Oh, let's
Yep.
celebrate the day that that person tried to get rid of the
Blow up
parliament.
Parliament, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you know, fun fact, I think it's something like every 10 minutes, one country somewhere in the world, or no, every 10 days, something like that, a country around the world celebrates independence from Britain.
Oh, that's
And I was like, whoa, okay. A fact I learned the other day. I'm going to have to look it up and get the correct number. But yeah, it's not that much. It's something like every
that's
10 days or every 2
understandable.
weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I thought, ooh. So a lot of countries have like an independence or unification day. And so we talked about those. But it was really an unnecessary kind of, alteration. There were lots of things that the book could have done instead of New Year. I mean, consider also Lunar New Year. A lot of Asian countries, not just China, we get into the habit of calling it Chinese New Year, but there are lots of Asian countries that celebrate.
Well, yeah,
Lunar
there's
New
Tet in Vietnam, and it's
and Christmas, mentions of Christmas in the book, and I'm like, okay, there is not just Christmas, there's also Kwanzaa, and there's Hanukkah, and like Yule, and so many. I think there's 13 different winter holidays. I think maybe more. So and I see where it is from the perspective of the materials creators. Like, they have to know what audience they're creating it for, but also publishers want a book that's as generic as possible, so they can sell it everywhere.
Often it comes from, you're asked to do, can you write this book? This unit 6 will be around January for most European countries, so we'll make it about New Year. So that's not relevant unless, for example, maybe you're talking, maybe you put in New Year's resolutions and turn it into the most sustainable New Year's party ever. In which point, you can talk about how you would have a party, you would make it sustainable, and you can connect it to something. You could connect it to a New Year's party. You could connect it to Lunar New Year. You could connect it to, Halloween, because, why not? That's a massively wasteful celebration.
Yeah. And that's another thing, I suppose, is that climate change doesn't often turn up as a theme in our books. And if it does, it's sort of like, we've done the climate change unit, now we're moving on, sort of thing. And we've talked before about, hearkening back to earlier in our conversation, teachers and unpaid work, are they paid for prep time? When teachers such as yourself talk about making their lessons sustainable, or touching on themes of sustainability or climate change or diversity, as we've been talking about now, teachers need time and resources to create those extensions and alterations to the book, to the materials that they're using. Is that time paid? Is that time appreciated? So there's all of that as an aspect as well. There was a really great webinar given by Ashley Moore. I don't know if you're familiar with Ashley Moore. And he talked about, he had created like a practical taxonomy for challenging hetero and cis normativity in TESOL materials. And there were 5 types of representation that you could see in English language teaching materials, the students' books. So first, bottom, like the most damaging, was explicit discrimination. So like the people who made the book purposefully thought, well, we're not including any of those queers, and kept them out of the book. Everything is white, straight, and middle class. Everything is very cis and heteronormative. Everybody is probably Caucasian, that sort of thing. And that was done explicitly on purpose, which is of course quite damaging. And then next up is normative erasure. So in this one, the materials writer who's creating the materials just hasn't thought of it, because they're following their normal impulses while creating these images, this vocabulary, these key terms, this grammar point. As they're building the materials, they don't think about diversity and representation. It just doesn't occur to them, because
they're just working on a timeline that was for yesterday.
You
need it yesterday, so you just come up with what you've done in a previous book, or you look at a different thing and you're like, this, and there's not that kind of pause at all.
Yeah. And so it is erasure, but it's like thoughtless. It wasn't done explicitly or on purpose. Nobody thought, we're going to keep out those people. Nobody thought that, but they also didn't think about inclusion either. And so then the third and sort of middle of the road is marginalized inclusion. People nowadays would call that like box ticking, or
yeah.
I have to have, if we're watching television.
Tokenism.
Yeah, tokenism. We have to have one person of color. We have to have one, queer person. We have to have, we just ticked the box. They're there, so it's fine. And yes, it's inclusion, technically, right? Because they've been included, but it's marginalized, right? They're not the center of attention. It's still like the hetero and cis and white people who are rich, middle class, whatever, people who are central in the materials. So the next step up, which is where I think a lot of conscious material writers and a lot of English language teachers who are starting to think about inclusion and representation, who are starting to consider that especially people who teach kids and teenagers, they have access to the internet. I wish when I was a teenager, I could have just looked up what non-binary was and known. Oh, that's me. Yeah. Easy. Didn't know that until I was in my mid-20s. I didn't encounter the label until then, so I just didn't know, right? And so kids now, like I taught some teenagers in Spain a few years ago when I was still living in Spain. One of them said to me, oh yeah, one of my friends is non-binary. Like kids know, they can look up information anytime. Oh, I'm a boy and I have feelings for other boys. I know that means I'm gay. I might be bisexual. Do I like girls too? They can answer those questions and they can search for information. So the next step would be mainstreamed inclusion. So mainstreaming, meaning that you have sort of equal representation, more or less, There are four photos of people, and two of them are gay men who are together, and then there's a woman of color who's Black, for example, and then there's an Asian man, for example. And so, we've got some diverse groups on there, and they're forefront, they're mainstreamed, they're part of it, okay? But then, and that's sort of, I think a lot of people are trying to move towards that, towards like mainstreaming. Sometimes we talk about normalizing. I kind of don't like that term, to be honest, because I'm normal. You don't need to normalize me. I'm here. I like the usualizing, because I am already here and I am normal. But let's usualize the idea of queer people, of people of color, that sort of thing. And so the top ideal he had was critical inclusion, the idea of we're being inclusive and we're being critical about it. So I'm including this woman of color who's in a relationship with another woman. And, there are a lot of negative stereotypes about Black women and the jobs that they do. So instead of making her this job, which people expect, she's instead going to be this job and her partner is going to be, you know what I mean? And they're purposefully, critically building materials which address, marginalized groups and not only queer people, as I said, but yeah. And so there's like a critical awareness as you're working.
I think one of the really important aspects to that as well is when they're making the examples, they make real examples. Find a real person that does that, find a real Asian female scientist at NASA to put in the book. It doesn't have to be, this is a picture of an Asian woman who is a doctor, and it's clearly a stock photo of an Asian. It's like, no, this is you just trying to put it. Make the stories real. Make them about real people. There are real people that do amazing things everywhere. It's something I'm trying to work on at the moment, and it's an issue I had with a course book that's used here in Spain. And each unit has a quote at the start of it. And of the 10 quotes, 9 of them were by white men, and the other one was by Helen Keller. And that's not to say Helen Keller's not awesome. Helen Keller is awesome. Everything she did was absolutely incredible. How many 13-year-old students will know who that is at a glance? Maybe you'll go in to look at who it was and read deep into Helen Keller's background, but most likely they'll look at it, they'll read the quote, that'll be it. What I'm trying to do at the moment with a project I'm working on is include a quote for each of the 12 lessons, but actually look at who's made the quote, and it's not just,
Albert Einstein,
some white dude who's saying it. It's not, or Al Gore, to be honest, because it's about sustainability. So often people go, bam, let's go to Al Gore, or let's look at Bill Gates. And it's like, No, let's not look at those people. There are
Well,
all sorts of other people involved in the
yeah.
movement. You know,
First Nations, for like Aboriginal and First Nations community has been practicing sustainability for thousands and thousands of years, and
yeah,
they've got
exactly.
lots to say about it. So,
Like there is a
Yeah.
case study with
Mm.
indigenous communities, of course,
Mm.
in the project. So
Mm.
yeah,
That's
it's
great.
pretty exciting. But these are things that I've learned as I've been going along. That I've seen other things that aren't exactly right. And we talk about the climate crisis being a part of our materials. We mentioned that and how it often
Mm.
it's not there enough, or it's in the background. Now, something we don't ever talk about is climate justice. We'll talk
Yeah.
about climate change or the climate crisis, whatever you want to call it. I want to call it the climate crisis. We'll talk about it and we'll mention it, and even then we'll show the floods in Germany a couple of years ago, or the bushfires in Australia or in
Flint
California.
water crisis in the USA.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
But if you look at the Flint water crisis, what you tend to be looking at then, yes, you're looking at a inverted commas developed nation, but it is affecting the poorest people in society. Whereas we usually look at, oh look, Germany that has been flooded, and we don't look at where we need to be looking, the areas that are most affected by the climate crisis.
Yeah.
Look at Pakistan last year; they were flooded while it was 51 degrees.
Yeah.
This is insane, and it gets on the news for 5 minutes. But floods, this could be in the textbook where it talks about the floods in Germany to make it, to have that local connection. But it can also talk about the floods in Pakistan. It can also talk about these other things. So
Like
one thing
Rise
I
Up in
try
ELT.
to exactly. So I like to make sure my students do feel a connection to what they're doing, and 70% of the students will be white, straight people. So I want them to be able to connect to the materials, but there also needs to be the other aspect that they also need to see that they haven't seen, that they need to connect with and understand.
Yeah. And there's no difference between, if you're teaching 14-year-old boys, there's no difference between a 14-year-old boy who's gay and a 14-year-old boy who isn't. Like, honestly, they're going through a lot of the same issues. Like, this is happening to me, and I'm suddenly interested in these people and I wasn't before, and what's the difference? I find that there's no need to exacerbate differences between communities. We can all relate to each other. Even though I'm non-binary, that doesn't mean I can't relate to my cisgendered friend. My partner is cisgendered, and he's a guy, but there are a lot of things that we have in common, a lot of struggles we've shared, or we're similar, ways we can relate to each other. So there's no reason to create materials which only show your students as well. And I think we'd be surprised. Young people are really, really on it. Like they know.
Switched on. Yeah.
So they can access any information online that they want. They can look up what is the climate crisis.
Well, and they want to know about it. They want to be taught about it. They don't want to only learn through memes. They want to learn from somebody, who's, and going on that journey with your students, if they help you learn about, inclusion or the LGBTQIA plus community, like if you're on that journey with them, that will be even better. You'll share that learning journey with your students. Now, to go back to materials and writing materials, it is a difficult thing. People are trying to do stuff about it. I've talked about Peter J. Fulliger in the past and the wonderful materials that he creates.
Tyson Seaburns as well.
I was about to mention Tyson, of course. And
name drop.
I've had him on twice actually. So
yes, I've seen, and you've also had Jordan Putman on as well, haven't you?
I have indeed, a fellow Sevillano. He's based here in Seville, so I did indeed. But I'd like to look at something that I noticed today actually on LinkedIn. I'm not sure if you've seen it yet, but Tyson will be doing a talk in November about. It's called. Now I've got it up here because I didn't want to forget. I didn't want to upset Tyson by forgetting the name of it. You're writing or editing materials with LGBTQ plus narratives. How's it going? Like that's the name of the talk, and it's it's kind of a check-in, I guess, because he wrote the book. He literally wrote the book, How to Write Inclusive Materials.
Write inclusive materials. I'm looking at it on my desk right now.
There you go. Oh, mine's in my ebook. Damn it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's going to be. Well, I don't know, but I'm hoping it's going to be like a check-in. With maybe some more ideas would be nice.
It's a process, right?
It really is a process, and you can't know everything about everything.
No,
I don't know everything about climate change and sustainability. It is what I've been studying. It's been my passion for 10 years. But there's still a lot for me to learn, and with what I'm writing, with what I'm doing, I'm learning more and more every day. And it's the same with inclusion. As a teacher, I want everybody to feel included. And as any teacher should want their students to learn and feel included. Now, if you don't feel included, it's much harder to learn. Now, even if you are, incredibly religious and it's, you decide to choose those 4 sentences from the Bible to fuel your bigotry. Even if that's the case, you should still want the best for your students. You should still want them to be included. And you should want them to be happy. If they are not hurting other people, they should feel at home in the class because they won't be hurting other people by being gay. That doesn't hurt. That doesn't hurt me. If I walk past a gay person in the street, it's exactly the same as walking past a straight person in the street. Yep. It's no effect on my life. So as a teacher, we should be pushing those boundaries, and even within ourselves and questioning our own kind of biases.
And usualizing, as you said
and
earlier.
Usualizing, of course.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's important because as I say, if you teach young people, they might be questioning things about themselves. They need to hear positive reinforcement. And also you might find that young people, if you're teaching young learners or teen learners, you'll find that they are probably already quite educated about it in their own language. I bet you experience in your classes, Harry, students bringing up local environmental issues or things that are going on in their local community because they hear about it in the news or their friends are talking about it or I have a friend who did this activity the other day or I have a friend who is queer, all this sort of stuff. And, they know and they have their own input. So a lot of teachers who are sort of quasi-material writers themselves have started, doing that, bringing their learners' experiences into the classroom. Well, we could go on a long talk about dogma and everything that we're getting from that. And I've done it myself, bringing things from the learners and having a learner-centered classroom, bringing in their experiences and the things that they see, the things they want to learn about. They know it in their own language. Now they want to do it in English, all those sorts of things. And you can create, it's meaning making right there. And they'll remember the English language they learned when they did it because it had meaning to them. Yeah. And I think that that's really important with any issue you discuss in the English language classroom, whether it's inclusion or the climate crisis or anything. It has to have meaning to them so they'll remember it.
Exactly. And that it's so easy to transmit these ideas. It's not a difficult thing to get your head around if you're learning it for the first time. If you're, there are people who struggle with a lot of things because they're relearning their ideals that they had in the past. These ideas like, what do you mean there's more than 2 genders? That's impossible. This is biology. Things cannot change. This is from history. There are people that think that, but children don't, because you can teach them a new thing. Now, we were teaching pronouns today in class. We were going through, trying to use the verb to be as well, and shapes and all sorts of things. But we were just going through, I, we, he, she, you, for you for you, as like more people. With Spanish, it's easy because you've got tú and vosotros. But then they as well, and it was like they for various people, but they for the singular. And the students kind of looked and were like, what? Singular they, and you explain it, and it's not difficult for students to understand. And I remember reading an excellent anecdote, and it was about somebody left their wallet in McDonald's, and they'd left it on the cash desk, and then somebody had come along and they had handed it in to the person who was selling, and they'd pass it on to their manager. The whole time, it's perfectly clear that something has happened by individual people using they. It's not that difficult. We've done it forever when we don't know exactly, if we're trying to refer to a he or a she or a they. So it's not a difficult concept to understand.
No. And sometimes it's not important. Maybe it's not important what the other person's gender is, just that the phone was forgotten and that it was handed in and that it was passed. It doesn't matter whether that person is male or female or neither, as long as the story unfolds, right?
Well, the story is about the thing that's been lost, the story is about that.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter. But also, it also sometimes gender isn't disclosed. Oh, Helen, I'm meeting my cousin this weekend. Oh, how are they? They didn't say their cousin, right? Oh, one of my students left their phone behind. I don't know which students it is. I'll take their phone to the receptionist and I'm sure they will come back for it.
Yeah.
We do it all the time naturally. And, in some languages, this translates easily because they have an equivalent, and in some it doesn't. And so, learners, I guess, sometimes it's a simple translation issue for them, and sometimes it's not. And they have to, wrap their minds around this whole other pronoun that's new to them.
Yeah, it's very tricky in Spanish. Having a gendered language, it's very difficult for people to get their heads around, because it is adding in a whole new word. Basically, there's now ellas, which is not ella or ello, it's ella.
Yes,
and it's, for me, wonderful. But for me, it's much easier in English because we just use they. It's much easier. Sorry, that was my little rant there. I apologise.
Pronouns. That's okay.
It's such an easy thing to teach, and it's another really easy thing to teach is love. Uncle Kevin's married to a man. Why is that? Oh, it's because he loves him. Oh, brilliant. There you go.
End of discussion. That's it.
That was it. There's no kid going, what do you mean? What? No, they don't care.
Yeah.
They don't say.
They know. Yeah.
But they know. So you love your partner. Brilliant. And Uncle Kevin loves Uncle Kevin's partner. There you go. That's why. It's done. So simple.
Very easy.
And the younger the learner, the easier it is. And as you say, teenagers nowadays are so much more in tune with these kind of things, and it's not
they're very
a
savvy.
taboo. It's not a weird thing to talk about. It's just it needs to be talked about, and it needs to be discussed, probably with them leading the conversation.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I think there was a survey done, I think about 5 years ago in Canada. So in Canada, to set your expectations, and it was something like 42% of people under the age of 20 did not identify as cisgendered and or heterosexual. 40%, that's almost half. So the kids that you're teaching do not fall into the binaries that you're accustomed to now. And we have to meet their needs, right? Because, they have to see themselves represented and see, oh, that's like me. That story is like me. Oh, I relate to that. I understand that. That's like me. And every learner deserves to be able to have that moment of, aha, it's me. Aha, it's like me. They all need to be able to have that.
And also have the safety to be able to say what they want to say and not have the fear. And I fear that, you see that segue there? I fear our time is running out. Yes. Time flies like the wind.
Yeah.
Fruit flies like bananas. There's a hilarious English teacher joke for you.
Oh boy.
There you go. Take that into your next English lesson. If you dare to use that at IATEFL, I will put you on the best pedestal in the history of time. Although I won't be there, so I won't be able to see it. You could just lie to me and say you said it, and I'll put you up on that pedestal anyway.
We can only hope that in future IATEFL will be hybrid and or recorded so that people can attend from long distances.
Exactly.
My pre-conference event was last year.
There you go.
the Pronsig conference event was. So let's hope that in future it'll be more accessible that way.
Fingers crossed. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. I hope to hear from and speak to you again in the near future. It has been an absolute pleasure. I will be back next week, I think. Let me just double check. It's not next week I'm away, it's the week after. Yes, I am back next week. With one of my favorites, DJ Tomato will be joining me. Find out more next week when I speak to the legendary DJ Tomato. Until then, thank you so much, and I'll hear you next week.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.